Peace, y'all. This is Bill Ramsey with Blackpool Adventures, and I'll be reading Brownsville, Texas, and the Black Soldiers. Despite stellar performances through 5 previous wars, black servicemen in the early 1900s were hated by the South and despised and unappreciated by the North. Southerners hated blacks in uniform because radical Republicans in Congress had used black soldiers to police the South during the Reconstruction and as an added humiliation after their Civil War defeat. After Reconstruction, black soldiers were sent to the western frontier to fight hostile Indians. But they found that the environment of white racism was tremendously more hostile than Native Americans. So nothing more typified American racial hatred for the black soldier than the Brownsville affair. During the summer of 1906, the 1st Battalion of the 25th Infantry Regiment was transferred from Fort Niobrara in Nebraska to Fort Brown, a post near Brownsville, Texas, at the mouth of the Rio Grande River. Now, they were there to protect against the Mexican revolutionaries. These 167 men had outstanding credentials for service, loyalty, discipline, and bravery during the battles fought in Cuba and the Philippines. 6 of these black soldiers held the Medal of Honor, and 13 had been awarded for their bravery in the Spanish-American War. These are some bad brothers, man. More than half of the soldiers had been in uniform for more than 5 years. Nearly 5 had served in active duty for more than 10 years, and 1 had accrued more than 27 years. Now the citizens of Brownsville were appalled and wrote William Howard Taft, the Secretary of War, requesting that he keep the white 26th Infantry at Fort Brown instead. The War Department refused to repeal the order and responded to Brownsville citizens. The fact is that a certain amount of race prejudice between whites and blacks seemed to have become almost universal throughout the country. And no matter where colored troops are sent, there are always some who make objections to their coming. The Brownsville citizens immediately posted new signs announcing no niggers or dogs. They did this on salons, restaurants, and all public and recreational facilities. However, since Brownsville is located near the Mexican border, most of the town's inhabitants were low-paid Mexican workers, and these Hispanics welcomed the soldiers at their establishments. Consequently, whites became very concerned that the assertive black infantrymen might inspire Mexicans to challenge the status quo of white dominance and to resist the Jim Crow law practices. As much as the white citizens of Brownsville hated black soldiers, they saw an interracial alliance as even a greater threat to their town and felt compelled to eliminate the black military presence by whatever means necessary. So, shortly after midnight, on August 14, 1906, a group of men across the road from Fort Brown and dressed in army uniforms began firing shots randomly into buildings at street lights for about 10 minutes. The random bullets killed a bartender and seriously wounded a police lieutenant. Military rifle cartridges and clips from Springfield rifles recently issued to the 25th Regiment were found at the scene. Several Brownsville citizens immediately claimed that they saw blacks shooting. Major Penrose said it could not have been black soldiers because the battalion's soldiers were accounted for by the company commanders at the 10 p.m. curfew check-in, and again immediately after the shooting. The rifles were also checked, and none had been recently fired. The major stated that anyone could wear an army uniform because old uniforms were routinely discarded right outside the fort, and that ammunition and rifles were known to have been sold to the citizens of Brownsville by the white 26th Regiment that occupied the fort before the black soldiers. Brownsville Mayor Fred Cum organized an investigating committee of local citizens who found witnesses who professed to have heard voices that sounded black. 5 witnesses said they saw black soldiers but could not identify anyone, and they weren't under oath. The committee prefaced their questions by stating, "We know that this outrage was committed by Negro soldiers. We want any information that will lead to a discovery of who did it." The committee did not call a single soldier to inquiry. After one day of testimony, the committee sent a telegram to President Theodore Roosevelt stating, "Our women and children are terrified, and our men practically under constraint, constant alarm and watchfulness. No community can stand this strain, and we actually have these troops at once removed from Fort Brown and replaced by white soldiers." President Roosevelt ordered 2 investigations. One by Major August Bloxam and a second by General Ernest Garlington, a racist native of South Carolina. They took as evidence the testimony of the white citizens and spent military cartridges and concurred that the black soldiers had committed the crime. They completely ignored the testimony of a civilian employee of the fort who swore that after the shooting he had seen 4 Brownsville citizens dressed in uniforms and carrying rifles. So the officers concluded that the black soldiers' denial of the shooting was proof of conclusion and a conspiracy of silence. And since no soldier would confess, they recommended dismissing the entire battalion. General Garlington added, "The secretive nature of the race, where crimes charged to members of their color are made, is well known." President Theodore Roosevelt delayed his decision until after his re-election so not to lose much-needed black support. Politicians, you know. Subsequently, on November the 28th, 1906, he ordered the discharge of all 167 soldiers of the 1st Battalion without honor. And he denied the soldiers all back pay and pension benefits. The soldiers never received a formal trial or the benefit of legal counsel, and this remains the only example of mass punishment without the benefit of trial in U.S. military history. White people across the country celebrated Roosevelt's decision. The New Orleans Picayune reported, "Whatever may be the value of the Negro troops in the time of war, the fact remains they are a curse to the country in time of peace." In December 1906, during the first congressional session after the Brownsville incident, Congressman John Garner of Texas, whose district included Brownsville, introduced a bill called for elimination of all blacks currently in the military and barring black enlistment. Let me read that again. In December 1906, during the first congressional session after the Brownsville incident, Congressman John Garner of Texas, whose district included Brownsville, introduced a bill called for elimination of all blacks currently in the military and barring black enlistment. Although his bill was defeated, he reintroduced similar bills in each of the next 3 sessions. Persistence to the plan, understand? Franklin Roosevelt rewarded Garner's racial hatred by selecting him as vice president in 1932 and 1936. Senator Joseph Foraker of Ohio tried to rally support without success for the black soldiers and even proposed a bill providing the men an opportunity to reenlist. Foraker's defense of the Brownsville soldiers and criticism of the White House so infuriated Theodore Roosevelt that the president proceeded to hound the citizen from public life. However, 66 years later, kind of slow, March 1971, Black California Congressman Augustus Hawkins introduced legislation to amend the records of the 25th Regiment to honorable discharge. On December 6, 1972, President Nixon signed a bill authorizing a one-time pension payment of $25,000 to 86-year-old Dorsey Willis, the only survivor among those discharged, and thus partially corrected one of the greatest injustices in military history. Wow. Brownsville, Texas. The black soldiers. This is ISM. I appreciate you listening.